Good morning, everybody. Now, here in the UK, there has been a very, very disturbing ruling given in a magistrate's court against a former police officer called Michael Chadwell. Now, I'm no fan of the police, but this is a police officer who retired, and that was a few years ago. And his supposed crime, which he's been convicted of, is responding to a meme in a funny way or a semi-funny way. But the judge decided that he was grossly offensive in what he wrote, and it was implied racism or a racist attitude, when you can read it and just think, well, that's a funny comment, and there was no actual racism implied. So the actual thing that happened was in a private WhatsApp group, which makes it even more disturbing that something in a private group was brought to the attention of the police, and then the Crown Prosecution Service were informed, and they decided to press charges against this former policeman for just writing a little semi-funny comment in a private group about a meme. So there was a meme going round, and apparently it showed some pictures of some parrots of different colours and some children, human children of different ethnic groups. And there was the question on the meme that said, why do we cherish the variety of colour in every species except our own? So I assume this was something going around by someone who was, completely innocent meme. It didn't really say much. It was just saying, oh, look, all lives matter, I imagine. White lives, black lives, brown lives, all matter. We're all wonderful human beings, like all parrots are human beings. Not all parrots, multicolored parrots are beautiful. No, not human, but they're lovely and beautiful to see. So I suppose that's what the meme was saying. Nothing wrong with that at all. I would have just looked at it and passed over and not even said anything. But this former police officer actually wrote a response to this, and it said, because I've never had a bike stolen out of my front yard by a parrot, which is actually quite funny. I guess, but what, it didn't say anything at all about children. Okay, yeah, it was a joke. It was a joke of the kind of things that you would see all the time in comedy shows out in the open in public, making those kind of jokes with implications about race and so on, mainly about white people. But anyone who makes a joke about white people in public never gets arrested or charged with any criminal offence. But this came to the magistrate's court, and he was convicted under the Communications Act 2003, Section 127, and the judge said that this was a grossly offensive comment, which is utterly ridiculous. It wasn't a grossly offensive comment, but what he said was that the comment itself wasn't grossly offensive, but the implication of the comment was grossly offensive. So this was Magistrate Tan Ikram, lovely English name there, and he said that the implication of this comment was that black people steal, which actually is a fact. There are people in all different ethnic groups who commit crime and who steal and do other crimes, such as drug dealing and so on. And even the Metropolitan Police's own statistics show that young black men are 8 times more likely to commit crimes, particularly violent crimes and knife crimes, in London than people of other ethnic groups. So actually, the implication of what he says, if you actually want to look into the facts of this, are true. Now, it's a terrible thing, and a lot of this is to do with the endemic family breakdowns in the black community in London and other cities. I mean, marriages are families are a disaster in the black community in London. So there's a lot of young boys who don't have a father figure, and then gangs become their fathers. They join gangs and they get kudos and status by doing criminal acts. This is a whole issue which is well known, well documented, and is an absolute fact. It's not right. much more needs to be done to help the black community, families to stay together, so that young black men have good role models and they don't get into gangs and commit more crimes than other ethnic groups. White children, Pakistani children, Bangladeshi children, Indian children, the crime rate is much lower than in black children in London specifically. This is an issue that needs to be dealt with, but it's a fact. So, you could look into this, and he says this is an offensive implication, but actually the implication is borne out by actual statistics of the Metropolitan Police, which have been published, and statements by the former police commissioner, Cressida Dick. She said exactly that thing when she was in the position as the head of the Metropolitan Police. So to actually say that this former policeman has made a grossly offensive comment or implication by saying what he said is a complete tyrannical travesty of justice. It is a tyrannical judgment which is imposing totalitarianism on our free speech and is undermining our free speech in a way that probably, even though this law is incredibly draconian, was never ever meant to be used, because the law itself, the Communications Act 2003, is very subjective. It says that offensive speech is allowed, but grossly offensive speech is a criminal offence if you post something online in a communication. Now, I mean, where is the line? I mean, who decides what is offensive and what is grossly offensive? It is completely subjective. And the problem with all these kind of laws, which are subjective, is that there is ever increasing creep and against freedom of speech. And there is always an advancement by cases like this setting precedents to say that's not allowed, that's not allowed, that's criminal, that's criminal. And then before you know it, after we're here 20 years after that act was implemented. I mean, what about another 20 years? Are we going to have a situation where the comedians I spoke about earlier are not allowed to actually have a comedy show or say anything of the nature that, comedians have been saying for the last few decades and on stage, and people go and pay to see them and they have a good laugh, and a lot of their jokes are offensive, but it's completely subjective because they are not deemed to be grossly offensive, and yet something that isn't grossly offensive here in this judgment has been deemed to be so, not because of the actual content, but because of the implication, reading into the implications of what is between the lines in this statement. And the judge thinks that he can be a mind reader of this guy and what he implied. This is very, very dangerous. There are other laws that do similar things. There's the Public Order Act 1986, which makes it a criminal offence to stir up hatred. Again, that is completely subjective. What is stirring up hatred? Someone actually may stir up hatred, like we've seen, people on the fringes of the pro-Palestine marches over the last few months saying things that stir up hatred, and yet they just get away with it, and nothing happens to them. And yet people who are just, saying things that, maybe come up to the line but don't go across the line, find themselves brought before the courts and put in prison. Someone I know was put in prison for this under the Public Order Act 1986. She's a woman called Tahra Ahmed. I met her on a few freedom marches. Now, I wouldn't say she's a friend, but, she's an acquaintance, and she was doing good work in the freedom marches, monitoring the police to make sure that they weren't tyrannical in what they did and too heavy and too violent against people who were going out to protest against lockdowns. Suddenly, she found herself before a court for some obscure Facebook posts 5 years before she was dragged through the courts, that no one had buried, that no one had looked at for ages. And she said some things which were wrong. They were offensive. What she was talking about Grenfell Tower, and she said that the fire in Grenfell Tower was a Jewish sacrifice. Now, again, I don't agree with that. It's silly, it's wrong, it's inaccurate. But, to be put in prison for something that she said like that 5 years ago under the Public Order Act is an act of tyranny by the state. Because, you shouldn't go to prison for a silly and inaccurate Facebook post that is 5 years old and no one has looked for. So the thing is, with these laws, if the state wants to get you for something, anything else, they can just go and troll through every single comment you've ever written on social media. Even private groups find something that they don't like and that they can deem subjectively to be against one of these laws, these tyrannical laws, which will enable them to convict you as a criminal for something you've said in the past, whether that's the Public Order Act, 1986, the Communications Act, 2003, there's the Racist and Religious Hatred Act, 2006. Again, this concept of hate, bringing this concept of hate into law is wrong, but it's been going on for decades now. There shouldn't be a concept of hate in law. The things that should be illegal are inciting violence and inciting crime. Now, this guy, this policeman here, he was not inciting violence. He was not inciting crime. His comment to some people would be funny, to some people would be offensive. Okay, that's true. But he should not even be, the police should not even be wasting time on this just to throw away a comment in a private group and then they're congratulating themselves on getting a conviction and he's going to be sentenced later this month. And the terrible thing is, the sentence for this, when he goes to sentencing, is an unlimited fine and or a prison sentence of up to 6 months. So this guy, this Michael Chadwell, could find himself in prison for 6 months for making a throwaway comment in a private WhatsApp group about a meme, which is just appalling. This is complete tyranny of the kind of thing that we had and we saw in the Bolshevik Soviet Union, where there were laws you didn't know what the law was. The checker would come along and they could arrest you and say, you did something which is against the law, but essentially you don't know what the law is. They're making up the law as they go. We got this magistrate here who's looked at the Communications Act 2003, which is subjective, and said, well, in this case, you're a criminal because of what you said. And he's setting a precedent which hasn't been set before, because no one has been convicted of something so weak and so minor before as a hate speech crime. But now this is coming in, and it sets a precedent that in the future you can write something in a private group that implies something that somebody feels is grossly offensive, and the powers that be, the police, the Crown Prosecution Service, the magistrates, the courts that are all into this woke agenda will just jump on and stick you in prison. This is absolutely terrible. How do we get out of this? Well, as you know, I run the Heritage Party. I'm the leader of the Heritage Party. We're going to be standing in local elections. We're going to be standing in the general election in 2024. We'll have as many candidates as we possibly can around the country. And if we do get into power, if we do get into government, we will introduce a Freedom Act very, very quickly, is one of the first things that we do. And the Freedom Act will repeal all of these laws which agitate against free speech. So the Communications Act 2003, Section 127, gone. The Public Order Act, the sections which make it criminal to stir up hatred, which is not clearly defined, it's subjective, or to criminalise words and behaviour that may cause fear, alarm and distress, they'll be gone. The Racist and Religious Hatred Act, again, completely subjective, gone. We will repeal those acts and other acts of Parliament which have gone through in the last 20, 30, 40 years, which take away freedom of speech. And we will introduce absolute freedom of speech like you have in the USA in the First Amendment. So yeah, obviously under that you're not allowed to incite violence. Of course, you're not allowed to incite crime. Okay, those are still forbidden under the First Amendment of the USA because that's causing danger, imminent danger to other people. But you have freedom of speech to comment on a meme, to make jokes, to have banter, and you shouldn't be afraid of just making a throwaway comment on the street and someone filming you and then it going around social media and then the police say, oh well, we're looking for this person, we found this person, we're going to drag them through the courts and put them in prison because you just happen to be, you know, in an agitated state and make some fiery throwaway comment which isn't inciting violence or isn't inciting crime. We need to just grow up and stop trying to virtue signal about taking away other people's freedom of speech. So we will do that as the Heritage Party. So if you want freedom of speech to be restored, if you want to get rid of these bad laws that magistrates and the police and the Crown Prosecution Service are now using to put people in prison for free speech that they deem to be hate speech, then please come and join me in the Heritage Party. Support our candidates, support what we're doing, and stand as a candidate yourself if you feel you can and you'd like to. You can apply on our website to do that, heritageparty.org. I should say that here for this poor guy who's been dragged through the courts, he can appeal, and let's hope he does, because now this has resulted in a conviction. He's going to be sentenced later on this month. We don't know what the sentence is yet, but he is allowed to appeal to the Crown Court, which is a higher court than the Magistrates Court. In the Magistrates Court, you get a summary conviction. So you're just in front of one judge, a magistrate, who is, basically a lay magistrate. You don't have to have a law degree to be a magistrate. Anyone can become a magistrate. Obviously you have to go through courses and apply and so on, be vetted and so on. But you can. Magistrates courts come out sometimes with just dreadful rulings. What he can do is appeal to the Crown Court, which is a higher court, and in the Crown Court you can ask for a jury. And really something like this needs to be tried by a jury in a Crown Court rather than a single magistrate. And I think if he does appeal against this conviction to the Crown Court and ask for a jury would just throw it out like that, because they'll realise that this is absolute nonsense, that he hasn't said anything grossly offensive. Yes, it may be offensive to some people, but it's not grossly offensive at all. So really, I never support, or I hardly ever support, crowdfunders for other things. Obviously I'm in the Heritage Party where we're raising money for our elections all the time to support our candidates. I very rarely support other causes. The only cause that I in crowdfunder I've supported, over the last 2 years is Public Child Protection Wales, who I know personally, who are fighting relationships and sexuality education being introduced in Wales, and trying to fight a court case in Wales against the Welsh government, who are bringing in absolutely hideous, disgusting, perverse materials to children in Wales in a court case that has implications for England, Scotland and Northern Ireland too. So I supported them. If this goes to an appeal in the Crown Court, yeah, I will support this, because this is really an important case about free speech. So obviously when laws are passed in Parliament, then it goes to judges and magistrates to make rulings in the courts that decide how the laws are going to be implemented and affected. And when you have a bad law like this, which is completely subjective, no one knows actually what the term grossly offensive means. It's up to the courts to interpret that in whatever way they see fit. And if something comes before a judge like this Tan Ikram here, a magistrate like Tan Ikram, who decides that he's going to make a point and he's going to sort of declare that this is now grossly offensive implications are now criminal. This needs to be appealed against, because if this is allowed to stand and it's not appealed, then this will be a precedent in law that will be set for any and all future cases that come before the courts while the Communications Act 2003 section 127 is in force. So we've got to do two things here. We've got to support any appeal for Michael Chadwell in the Crown Court, and you've also got to come and join the Heritage Party to repeal this law in Parliament, so that if this law is repealed, and we're the only party that will do that with the Freedom Act, then there will not be any more judgments like this, because this section of this act will be struck out of law. And that's what we need to do at a higher level, at a Westminster level. So there's two ways that we all need to get active to fight this. So all I can do to you, again, is to appeal to you. If you value your free speech, please do come and join the Heritage Party, because we are the only party that is fully committed to repealing these bad laws and implementing a Freedom Act that will give everybody the absolute right of free speech, like you have in the First Amendment in the United States, as I've said before in this video. Thank you for listening, everybody, and God bless you all.